Before we get into all that football stuff, I got to ask Brian, have you watched Haunting of the Hill House or
No,
The Haunting of Hill House?
no. What is that?
It is a Netflix series, right? Like this is not an endorsement or like, they're not paying us to talk about this,
Right off the
but
bat.
um, it is like a horror kind of one season Netflix special based off a family and a haunted house that they grew up in and kind of the impact that it kind of laid for the rest of their lives. And it's crazy, man. I'd say
Uh,
probably the best Netflix show I've seen in maybe like a year or two.
that's a high bar. Is it based on a true story or?
It's based on a book, right? So I hope the story is not true because it's actually
Yeah. Yeah.
frightening as hell, man. But the plot, the character development, the twists and turns, and like, with a lot of scary movies, and I know Halloween is behind us now, but there's always those like gimmicky kind of scares, right? Trying to get you to jump. And
Right.
after a while, some things I think even like whether scary movies or shows, they kind of run their course and it's like, all right, let's get to the end. This is
Right.
kind of, you know what I mean? We get it. Let's find out who the bad guy is, whatever. This is nothing like that. Like there's no gimmicky scary bits. Like it might go like 20, 25 minutes and it's like a real drama television show. And then you see something creeping up in the background. And anyway, Occupy followers, if you haven't watched that and you're looking for something to binge quick, 10 episodes, The Haunting of Hill House.
Actually,
Highly suggest.
let's keep talking about this. I have a couple of questions. One, did you watch it all in one day?
Did not, but I did watch it in a span of about like 4 to 5 days. So Paige and myself, we always get in the Halloween mood, and instead of a movie, we were like, let's. And to be honest, I had like 3, 4 different friends tell me about it in the past
Hmm.
week, so kind of forced my hand.
All right. Is it a psychological or is it more?
Absolutely. It
Okay.
is a psychological thriller. It has elements of like, yeah, everything from mental illness and like, people that go through things that change their perception to like drug abuse, the like
Shit.
spiritual stuff. So it's very dark and deep. It has a lot of substance and depth. And like me myself, like, I gotta say, like um I'm not afraid to say that some scary movies do get me, but most of the time, I'd say I have a good tolerance. This one, they're like, I had a legit nightmare after I think episode 6.
Shit.
No lie, I woke up in the middle and I almost knew it. Like after I watched it, I was just so terrified.
Oh my God. Okay.
But I'm good now, for the record. Like, no more nightmares. Just finished it up yesterday and incredible. Like they better win awards.
Wow. That's high praise. I don't know if I want nightmares, but I'll definitely check it out. And
Yeah.
also, I have some ghost stories that we can tell on a future podcast, by the way.
Oh yeah, the ghost of Ryan Fitzpatrick. Maybe let's
He's back
let's
this
start
week.
there. Yeah, he looks like that one ghost pirate in SpongeBob. I can't remember with his beard. You know who I'm talking about?
I know. Yeah. Oh shit. What's his name? Yeah, I know exactly what you're talking about.
Yeah. Well, he's back, and obviously last week that Buccaneers Bengals game was a focus for a lot of DFS players, and Jameis Winston was one of the most popular options in cash. Ended up throwing a stinker, and then in comes Fitzpatrick, and this Bucks offense all of a sudden got going.
Yeah. By the way, it's the Flying Dutchman.
The Flying Dutchman.
Yeah. So I mean, what a circus this organization is. I mean, what is happening, right? They're just making moves trying to save their job. They're really not trying to maximize the future
Mm-hmm.
of the organization, right? They're only putting in Fitzpatrick because maybe they can win a couple games and maybe they're not
Mm-hmm.
canned at the end of the year. So obviously that's not ideal decision making for an NFL team, but many teams do this. So now we get Fitzpatrick and his price is like crazy cheap, 5,500 DraftKings, 7,100 FanDuel.
Mm-hmm.
Right now in our projected ownership in our model, he's a third highest projected owned quarterback. I would be surprised if that doesn't go up by Sunday. I mean, their team total's up. We know what Fitzpatrick has done. They've only thrown, I think they've thrown, as a team, they've thrown for 400 yards 3 different times this year, 300 yards in all but one game. So he's going to sling it. And I mean, a ton of high floor, high upside. I don't think he'll get benched in the middle of the game for Winston. That would be
No.
Maryland athletics level disaster decision making if they did that. So I think he should have a great game.
Yeah, and I'll play a little devil's advocate here because, first of all, I do agree that's a lot. As you know, a lot of organizations are run inefficiently, where you might have GMs and coaches thinking very short-sighted, right? And like instead of maximizing, the outcome, the potential outcome, they're focused on keeping their jobs, right? I will say here for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, they've lost. I think 3 of their last 4 games, right? I'm sorry, 4 of their last 5 after starting 2-0. And yeah, they've been skidding. But if you look back, so week 1, they beat the Saints. Week 2, they beat the Eagles. As it stands, 2 very impressive victories. Fitz threw for 400 yards, right? Week 3, we all remember Monday night. They got down behind. They got down early, but they did battle their way back against Pittsburgh. Only lost by a field goal, right? And then things started to get ugly. Chicago, Atlanta, right? Once again, 2 teams that I don't consider pushovers by any means, 2 playoff teams. And if you look at their first 5 games already, you're like, damn, that's not an easy first 5 games. They beat the Browns in overtime. They had to go to Cincinnati. Fitzmagic kind of brought them back in the game. And right now, in my eyes, here's what I see. I see a 3-4 football team. The odds are they're not really going anywhere this year. But with that said, they're still in it. And they have their strength is that passing offense. It's, Mike Evans, DeSean Jackson, Godwin, Bray, OJ, like what they're able to do, you got to admit, this is a top 5 at least receiving core / tight end group in the league, right?
Yeah, for sure.
And Fitz has shown that with him at quarterback this year, relative to Jameis Winston, that offense it can move the ball without turning the ball over as much, which is crazy to think because once again we're talking about Fitz. But without a running game, without much of a defense, I think that Fitz actually might add a win or 2. Now, is that the difference between 6-10, 8-8? Probably, but maybe, who knows? Maybe they make a run.
You don't know. I mean, the offense should score a ton of points regardless of who's under center. The weird thing to me is what do you do with Jameis? He's what, 24 or something along those last 25? And I mean, obviously a ton of statistical success in his first couple years in the league. Mm-hmm. And if you look at just advanced metrics, he's one of the best quarterbacks in the history of the NFL at just getting first downs, which is important. It's an important skill to have, but he turns the ball over like crazy. So yeah, I don't know where you go if you're an organization. Like, let me ask you this: if you're Tampa Bay, do you pick up that 5th-year option?
I don't. I mean, I was pretty. So, I was ready to sell on Winston before this year, and to be honest, some of the off the field shit makes it that much easier to kind of pass up on. But here's a guy who, in a way, we know what his weaknesses are. They've been pretty consistent. He turns the ball over. His deep ball is not accurate. With an offense like this, those are literally the 2 things you can't do, right? You can't miss the deep ball, and you can't turn the ball over. And he had a chance. They gave him his job back this year. What else could he want? He has the weapons, right? He has the players around him to maybe the O-line's not that, but it's not an excuse, man. We've seen enough, at least in my eyes. And I mean, he's turned the ball over 10 times already, and there's just levels to it. There was a point in time when Kirk Cousins first came in the league, and yeah, he threw a pick every game, right? But the difference between a pick every game and 2 picks every game is pretty big.
That's a pretty massive difference. And honestly, I don't even think he would be viewed. I don't even think this would be a decision if he wasn't such a rah leader type of guy. If he was just a normal level leader quarterback.
But people get first pick overall, right?
People win the national championship. People get so caught up in that. It's like, oh man, he's a hell of a leader. And even when they were on Hard Knocks, you heard it too. It's like, oh man, This guy's
I don't even buy it. I mean,
I don't either. Honestly, it's the same. I don't
want to be like, I don't know the guy. I'm not in any Tampa Bay locker room per se, but I mean, you see how the guys responded to Fitz coming in, and I mean, DeSean Jackson hit. First of all, if Day like this offense is like if DeSean Jackson is on his game, changes everything for this offense, right? If he's catching that deep ball. All of a sudden, like that's when they're competing. That's when they can beat some of the best teams in the league. If he's not like dialed in, if DeSean, then all of a sudden, like it just becomes a more one-dimensional offense, right? Going through Mike Evans and like Fitz has found a way to get DeSean Jackson playing at like the day level we know.
Right, and and he's actually been not consistent, but he's been hitting deep plays at a crazy high percentage. So anyway, if Fitzpatrick's better for Winston, I'm sorry, Fitzpatrick's better for DeSean than Winston is. So just from a fantasy perspective, looking there, I don't know. The whole situation is just insane to think about. And Fitzpatrick, we know the Fitzpatrick cycle. He'll lose his job again at some point this year. Yeah, so
most likely.
We'll see. But if Winston gets hurt, they have to pay him a shit ton of money. So
yeah, they might. I don't know. I mean, I don't know what Tampa's thinking, but if I was in a front office seat, I mean, I would have tried to move him at the trade deadline, to be honest. I don't think I would have ever put him back. Like I felt like Fitzpatrick had done enough, through 4 weeks of the season to get at least another 4 weeks, right? And I mean, the pace he was at, like I could just feel that even though they lost with Fitzpatrick to the Steelers and the Bears game wasn't going well, like the team, the weapons really believed in it. They felt like they had something going, and when you plug in Winston, that kind of took away some of the momentum. And I mean, look, they're still they're not 1-7, they're 3-4, and they have some winnable games coming up on the schedule, so they're not going to pack it in here, but I don't think going with Fitz is packing it in. I think going with Fitz gives them the best chance to win.
Yeah, honestly, it's hard to disagree with that. So you're probably right.
So we'll see. But on the other, I mean, this game does have the highest overall implied total. They're facing the Carolina Panthers. What do you make of Carolina's offense? Anytime someone plays Tampa Bay, we're always kind of looking at it. We saw what Joe Mixon did last week. McCaffrey now in kind of a similar spot.
Yeah, I think you have to be. McCaffrey finally got in the end zone a couple times last week. What surprised me about this offense is North Turner, out of nowhere, just being super creative and running all kinds of misdirections and options, and it just doesn't look like a North Turner offense. So kudos to him. This is one that if you just look around the industry and you look at different sites, you'll see it's one of the few weeks that Mahomes isn't ranked as the #1 overall quarterback. Most people have Cam Newton as #1 just based on the matchup purely and Cam Newton's play this year. But that makes it no surprise. Everyone else sees this too. Cam is expected to be the highest owned quarterback. Yeah. According to our model, 17 to 18%. So
regardless of the let me ask you this. Forget the matchup for a second. Is Cam Newton not the best in a vacuum, like cash game quarterback in the NFL?
It has to be, right? I mean, his rushing floor, 30, 40, 50 yards a game, especially this year where he's getting tons of carries.
Oh, yeah.
Even games where he's not great as a passer, he presents one of the highest floors. So that's a good point, too. So if you're playing low risk, it's hard to go wrong with him in this matchup at the high ownership.
And for perspective, Christian McCaffrey's had 92 carries this season for 423 yards. Cam Newton's had 62 carries for 309 yards.
Insane.
And he's rushed for 3 more touchdowns himself. Wow. And has 2 more first downs. So, yeah, I mean, you're getting pretty much like a Christian McCaffrey running back within Cam Newton as a quarterback, as far as potential rushing output and right. From yards to touchdown potential. I mean, Cam Newton is more likely to rush for a touchdown than Christian McCaffrey, if we're being honest with the way.
No, for sure. Absolutely. You look at projections, I guarantee he's has a higher chance. But actually, I ask you this, is Cam Newton, is there a guy that is more that you hate more when you're playing against him, or a guy you love more when you have him on your team? I can't think of a completely opposite spectrum for if you're playing against them, it's like, God damn, I hate this dude. If you roster him in DFS or you have him on your team, you're doing the Superman.
So fun, yeah. Like, oh yeah, no, and I think like Cam Newton's the type of guy when you see your opponent has him, like some guys you're like, maybe he could have a bad game and throw 2 picks. Like with Cam Newton, you're like he could throw 2 picks and he'll probably rush for 2 touchdowns with
right.
yards. So like, floor is very high, the upsides there. This game is going to be highly targeted. Give me 2 low-owned options outside of, obviously we know Mike Evans, McCaffrey, right? Give me 2 low-owned options in this game you like.
I think first is Chris Godwin. He's actually played more snaps the last couple of weeks. The numbers weren't there last week. He did catch the 2-point conversion late in the game, but he is playing more snaps, and I don't know if that was because of the whole DeSean Jackson, the trade deadline thing. But I think Godwin is earning more of a role in this offense. So I think Godwin's one. And then DJ Moore, I'm trying to look now to see what his projected ownership is. It's still 10 to 11%. But his coming out party was last week, and he should continue to capitalize. Torrey Smith hasn't practiced again this week. And that's really all the opening he needed because DJ Moore just looks electric, looks like a running back when he gets the ball in his hands. Just an impressive performance last week at a super cheap salary. And his price hasn't gone up that much, $4,300 on DraftKings. 5,300 FanDuel. If Torrey Smith's out, I think Moore is one of the better plays in this game. Yeah,
and he's had 4+ 20-yard catches, right? He definitely has big playability, and the yak is there as well. Compare him to he has 100 more yards after the catch than Devin Funchess on. Wow. Pretty much like almost half the receptions, right? So that's the upside play. The Torrey Smith, situation that can certainly move the needle. Greg Olsen though, he's looked pretty sharp since he's returned from that injury.
He has, and if you follow Pro Football Doc on Twitter, Dr. David Chow, we've mentioned him many times before. It's an excellent resource, and he said if he's playing, he should be near 100%. Right? It's a tough injury to rehab, but he should be near 100%. It's just that. The likelihood of him re-breaking that foot and requiring surgery is pretty high. Yeah. Whether it happens in game, early in the game, late in the game is hard to tell. But just from a usage in the offense perspective and how healthy he is right now, certainly, yeah. And he's one of the higher ranked tight ends in the model. And unsurprisingly, given the matchup, number 1 or number 2 in projected ownership this week.
Yeah, there you go. And one more thing I want to point out, just kind of as we keep our eyes on the wild card and playoff pictures clearing up. Right now in the NFC, that 4th playoff spot, that 6th playoff spot belongs to, I believe, the Vikings, who are 4-3-1, right? So there is a very thick middle of the pack. Everyone from the Falcons, the Bucks, the Seahawks now kind of find themselves back in it. Dallas isn't out of it. The whole NFC North is right in it. So whether or not we think these teams have something to play for or not, a lot of teams are of the mindset like these are must-win games, where our guys are playing through these injuries, where we're not more like perfect example. I really think the Buccaneers right now are looking at this like we can make a push for the wild card. That's why they're going with Fitz. But yeah, it's a big division game. We have a few of those this week, including the second Steelers at Ravens matchup of the season. And the first one, the Steelers dropped. The Ravens have looked pretty impressive. We talked about them as kind of one of these underdog playoff kind of teams, given how effective their offense and defense has been versus the points that they've produced. Who do you like in this game?
Good question. I think the Ravens at home, just based on some recency bias and Ravens coming off a pretty down game in Carolina, coming back home now to face a division rival. This game is actually, and it may be all year, the biggest playoff implication game that we'll see. So if we look at Brian Burke's and ESPN's FPI playoff leverage, the Ravens' playoff chances change 32% based on the outcome of this game, and the Steelers' chances change 24%. So combined 56% swing based on who wins this
Huge leverage game.
It's a massive, massive game. Yeah. And Ravens are a 3-point home favorite. Pretty standard for this matchup. Whoever's home normally is the favorite. So I don't know. I give the edge to the Ravens because they do have a top tier defense. It's whether or not Flacco, because he didn't look that bad at the beginning of the year, but now Flacco's starting to show some cracks and be the Flacco of old. I don't think they're anywhere close to benching him for RG3 or Lamar Jackson, but I think it should that thought should start to creep in their mind because they want to take this to the next level. And we mentioned in the preseason, Lamar could be that guy. I just don't think they're going to do it.
Yeah, no, it's I think they'll ride it out. I think they'll be fine. I think Joe Flacco is going to bounce back better at home. They've given him weapons this year, so we know who he is. We're not saying he's going to be like a top 10 quarterback, but he's not Eli Manning in my eyes yet. Like he can still make plays and get the ball downfield. But big acquisition, Ty Montgomery, or meh? What are your thoughts?
I mean, they basically just got him for free as a 2020 conditional 7th-round pick, which to me is just like
it's rude, if anything.
Yeah, Green Bay just saying, all right, you want to do this shit on your own and take it out of the end zone. We'll skip you off. Which I mean, isn't that bad because he's still going to a playoff team? I don't know. But yeah, I was kind of confused at first, but then Mike Clay of ESPN actually tweeted about it. He was like, oh, this kind of makes sense because the Ravens are looking for a returner. Their number 3 backs are hurt. So now they got a number 3 running back and a kick returner / punt returner. And I think it makes the most sense. I don't really think it'll have that big of a fantasy impact. I know a lot of people are panicking if you have Alex Collins or Buck Allen, but I don't really see him breaking into that rotation. Yeah,
and as long as there's 3 of them, I mean, if someone, let's say if Buck Allen or Alex Collins goes down, then it could be interesting. But they do have a lot of different guys they spread the ball out to in the passing game as well. So nothing that I'm overly excited about. So the Bears and the Bills, this is the lowest over and under game of the slate, 37.5 points. I'm very inclined to say it's going to go over. Am I crazy?
I don't think so. No, I mean, one, would it surprise you if the Bears scored 37? Maybe after Bills being on Monday Night Football and national TV and holding the Patriots down. But I don't know. With Nathan Peterman, there should be tons of turnovers, obviously.
Yeah.
So the Bears actually opened as an 8.5-point favorite, now up to 10-point favorite. The Bills have a team total of 13.75 points, which is not good. I don't know. I can see the over here. I think it just depends on the Bears' game plan. Are they going to pound the ball with Jordan Howard? Do they think that may not work against this Bills defense? Are they going to spread out with Cohen? Because last week they just handed the ball off to Jordan Howard. Didn't have to try very hard. Handily beat the Jets. Bills aren't a great team, but we'll see what their game plan is. And I think that'll determine. I don't know if we'll get any word before kickoff, but I think that is really going to be the impact on the over-under.
Yeah, and I mean, when you look at Mitch Trubisky's pass attempts, last week, he had a good fantasy game, but let alone he had a 70-yard screen pass on an all-out blitz that went for a touchdown. But before that, he against New England, he threw the ball 50 times, but more often than not, he's kind of in that 25 to 35 range, and I can see the Bears get ahead early, and then the turnovers start coming, the strip sacks and and the picks. Yeah. Do you think that limits Chicago's off? Because here's what's so weird about Chicago. We follow them very closely, right? Their offense at times can seem especially for fantasy purposes, very frustrating. Whether it's Jordan Howard, whether it's it's getting Taylor Gabriel going, whether it's Trey Burton's volume earlier in the season, but then they just pop off some games and all of a sudden, they're GPP winners. And then you have a matchup like the Bills. What do you make? Who are the Bears to you at this point in the season? I know, you have a bet on them and their personal kind of bias there, but who do you see them as right now?
Yeah, well, first of all, I don't think they want Trubisky throwing the ball more than 35 times a game, right? They want to run these option routes and run the ball and short, quick passes. Because if Trubisky's dropping back to throw 50 times a game, they're probably in trouble. Because and this is so funny to me. You look on Bears Twitter or even fantasy Twitter, people who have Trubisky, it's if you say anything bad about Trubisky, they're like, well, he's putting up crazy stats this year. And he is. He's a top 5 fantasy quarterback. He's legit won 2 millionaire tournaments on FanDuel DraftKings. But if you actually watch him play, he's miserable passing the ball, which makes no sense because that's why I was so high on him coming into this year. He was great last year in a limited offense coming into this
Right.
new offense, you think it'd be great, but his footwork is a mess. He's missing wide open receivers. He actually has the number 2 worst off-target throw percentage in the league after, I think it's Josh Allen.
Oof,
Right.
company.
Yeah, I know. And he's actually not been great. He's a product of the offense. So people see the fantasy numbers like, man, Trubisky's playing so much better in the second year. He's actually playing worse than he played in his rookie year. Just that the offense is covering a lot of his deficiencies. So as much as it pains me to say it, because like you said, I have an investment in the Bears, he's going to be their downfall unless he improves, because they're going to need him to make these throws eventually, especially in the playoffs if they make it that far and play some of these tougher teams. And he's not making those throws right now. So I'll be curious to see how the Bears adjust their scheme or see what they can do to compensate for Trubisky's inaccuracy.
For sure. And like I said, the NFC is going to be a dogfight. And you have teams like even the Seahawks surprising everyone, right? Coming out of the woodworks now. They're above 500 and like right there in the thick of things. A game I like a lot, Chargers against Seattle. I feel like this game has a lot of like blow up potential as far as the receivers, the running backs, the quarterbacks. Like this game could be, I think, that game that you stack.
I think it could be too, and a lot of people are looking at the Seattle's recent games, and if you look on Twitter at all, you'll see this game features 2 of the slowest paced teams in the league. But I agree with you, though. I think this will open up a bit. We'll be curious to see if Melvin Gordon actually suits up with his hamstring injury, but I agree. I think this actually could turn into a bit of a shootout in Seattle, and people may be overlooking it. I don't know if Seattle's going to be able to run the ball as well as they have been recently. Detroit is a slow-paced team last week, and that kind of contributed. I mean, Russell Wilson, if you look at his attempts, he hasn't attempted more than 25 passes in the last couple of games. So people are looking at that, and they're looking at his touchdown percentage. I don't know. I think it's going to regress eventually. They're going to have to pass more. Yeah, and an explosive offense like the Chargers could force them out of that tendency. So I'm actually on board with your thought here that this could go over the total.
Yeah, and I mean, I keep on looking at Doug Baldwin, right? And I mean, look, last week was not a good week for him. He had 3 targets, 2 receptions, 26 yards. But he did have a red zone target. The week before, he had another red zone target. You know, he hasn't scored. He hasn't found a way to get in the end zone. But is it just like, am I off base? But can we not count on him to have 1 or 2 like blow up games this season, or are those days behind it? Like
he should, right? I mean, he's playing a lot of snaps. He's getting some targets, but then David Moore out of nowhere is just catching touchdowns on like every other pass, as is Tyler Lockett, which is helping contribute to Wilson's just crazy touchdown percentage. So I don't know. That's all I can say is I don't know, because I'm debating starting David Moore in a league this week. I know people have asked me specifically about Doug Baldwin. Should they play him this week? And Baldwin his numbers will improve as long as Seattle passes the ball more. And if this is a game that we think they'll pass the ball more, then I think it'll help his numbers. Whereas David Moore and Tyler Lockett, they're legit catching touchdowns on like 3 or 4 targets a game. So,
and last week's game script was, and really the last 2 weeks against Detroit and Oakland, the Seahawks have gotten up pretty early, right? And this game, I don't think, for me at least, especially if Melvin Gordon's healthy, I think the Chargers are a better team. And unlike the Raiders and Detroit, I don't see the I don't see the catch up or I don't see the Seahawks getting a huge lead and just running the ball away.
I don't think so either. But actually, the Chargers are top 2 or top 3 in running percentage on early downs. And obviously if you listen to us ever or follow Warren Chopper on Twitter, where it's like that's just like the worst,
crazy,
like the worst thing you possibly do. Yeah. But the Chargers are actually really good at doing it. They're the best team in success rate on first and second down and running the ball. So it's kind of hard to argue with them if they're being so successful with it. So that's really the key. If Seattle can shut down the early run game, and Seattle's defense has improved dramatically, and it's got to the point where they're almost in that sweet spot of that offensive and defensive expected points Super Bowl chart that we retweet on Twitter every week. So if they can stop the early down runs and force LA to pass more on early downs, that'll open up the game more too. So I think there's a lot of layers to this game that'll contribute to how it plays out.
Yeah, and including the weather. So keep an eye out on that, right? It's in Seattle. It could be super windy and rainy right now. The forecast still a few days out, but could be a wet game. 5 in a row for Houston. Deshaun Watson, DeAndre Hopkins, and now Demaryius Thomas. Welcome aboard this Houston offense. Lamar Miller getting it going. Like, are they the real deal? They're on top of the division. They're clearly buyers. Well, they were buyers in the trade deadline. Are they like a legit contender?
I don't think so. I think just one, they have just a million injuries on defense in the secondary. Last year they lost all their front seven. This year they lost like literally every cornerback, and then their star linebacker, Zach Cunningham, he's out for a few weeks now. So at one point they were down to their 6th and 7th string quarterbacks on Thursday night. So I mean, just massive injuries. So, but honestly, I think the biggest loss is Will Fuller. He stretched that offense so much. And you look at the splits when he's on and off the field for Deshaun Watson, small sample size, of course. But what I'll be curious to see, and I think, I haven't really heard this, but Kiki Kuti, who came out of college as a field stretcher, he wasn't really a slot guy. He did play in the slot, but he was like a T.Y. Hilton. I'm trying to think. So he can stretch the field. I'm wondering if they move him to that Will Fuller role and they traded for Demaryius Thomas, put him in the slot.
It would make sense because I heard a few people say, like a Texans fan talking about, I'm glad we got DT, to kind of fill in for that Will Fuller role. And in my head, I'm like, I don't think they're like the same type of receiver, man. No. It would make sense. It'd make a lot of sense. And this is another game. Look, we'll get to the Rams and Saints in a second, which is going to be the most popular game with the 60 point over and under. But this is another game that, I see a lot of high upside plays that can be pretty low owned from, Lamar Miller. We've seen this Denver defense against the run. We know what Deshaun Watson and D-Hop as a stack can offer, right? D-Watt has the rushing upside, but he's not afraid to throw the ball deep, and Hopkins is a big playmaker. And then on the other side, you have someone like Cortland Sutton, who's probably going to be like super high owned right this week, considering his price. And then Emmanuel Sanders should get a little maybe boost with targets as well. Is this a game that you have on your radar as far as stacking?
Probably, just given what we mentioned with Houston's injuries in the secondary. So, and it's one of those games you can stack because it doesn't cost you as much money, right? If QT plays, you can get him for pretty cheap. Sutton, like you said, will be popular. And it often goes overlooked in games like this where not a star player, but an important piece of the offense is out or missing, like Demaryius Thomas. Yeah. Most people look to play the fill-in because they're cheaper. But the other highly targeted guy in that offense, like Emmanuel Sanders, tends to go overlooked a bit because he will be leaned on more heavily with DT out of the picture. And so I do like both of those guys. Really curious to see how the Houston offense plays out in this one. But just because of the injuries in the secondary, I think it does have that potential to shoot out. I just don't know how the passing game targets are going to shake out for Houston. The only thing I do know is that with Will Fuller out of the lineup, D-Hop's targets go up by like 3.5 targets per game. He's one of the guys you want to pay up for this week, and you can easily just stack an opposing receiver, whether it's Sutton or Sanders, have a nice little back there.
Facts completely. And look what Emmanuel Sanders, he hasn't been. I feel like the beginning of the season there was hype, especially I think after his week 1 performance where he had like 10 catches for 135, but he's putting himself together a very, very solid season, and in a way, like he's who I thought Jarvis Landry would be as far as like cash games and that sort of high floor play.
Right. Yeah, I think 100%. Landry's back to his Miami yards per catch rates now all of a sudden out of nowhere, which I don't know how that's happening. But Sanders is a pretty safe play this week, I think.
So, we'll get there now. The Rams and the Saints. This is the game that everyone's going to be hype about. I know the Packers and Patriots are the Sunday night game, but for me, this game is probably a preview of the NFC Championship game. And so much firepower. I really don't know where to start. You legitimately have 5 playable receivers, 3 playable running backs, 2 playable quarterbacks. How do you break down this game and where can you find value? Because there's a lot of price tags up here.
I know. Is it crazy to think this game goes under at all? But my thought is the Saints are running the ball like crazy. They're running the ball a ton since Mark Ingram came back. It wouldn't surprise me to see them continue that. I know the Superdome is basically the course field of NFL. So, but do they run the ball more to keep Jared Goff and that offense off the field? Maybe. I don't know. I guess the biggest question is if it's basically a pick 'em at this point.
Right.
And this will be the closest game likely that the Rams play. They got tightly contested last week against Green Bay.
Mm-hmm.
And if you look at splits between games that are within 2 scores or games that finish beyond 2 scores, Jared Goff obviously throws a lot more in those closer games.
Mm-hmm.
Gurley's volume is way down. So it really depends on what you think. I don't think the Rams are going to come here and blow them out by any means.
No.
So if that is the case, you have to like the Rams passing game more than you do paying up for Gurley, which is you're not getting a discount at all in this game. He's still 10,000 or 9,800 on DraftKings and like 11,200 on FanDuel, which I just don't think it's ever possible to pay that much for a running back.
It's crippling. We talked about it last week. Like it's not that he might still hit value, but with the rest of your lineup, you're going to have a hard time. Like you're going to look at 2-3 positions in your lineup and want to throw up.
Right.
But no, I mean, I don't think it's crazy. We've seen remember, I'm not going to compare the Cleveland Browns to the LA Rams at all, but we've seen this sort of letdown in the dome before, right? Where you expect a sort of high tempo, up pace game, and then all it takes is 2 possessions that take 7-8 minutes and net a field goal, and that's 25% of the game, right? So in my eyes, there is a contrarian sort of play that I look at this game, and let's say I'm going elsewhere, I'm stacking like the Texans or Seahawks Chargers game. What about throwing in Mark Ingram, right? And let's say the Saints have that favorable game script. He gets 15 carries, 5 catches, get some red zone looks, and then maybe a big play guy like Traquan Smith, right? Those are 2 guys. I don't think many people that stack this game are going to pick those 2 guys, and you'll save a lot of money.
I like that idea a lot because the Rams, we earlier in the season, we talked about, okay, their defense actually isn't that great, and teams were able to pick on them through the passing game. Mm-hmm. But then recently, that hasn't really been the case. Aaron Rodgers was held to 30 attempts. C.J. Beathard, who we thought was a cheap, maybe even low-risk option in Week 7, goes 15 for 27 for 170. Mm-hmm. So they've improved in the passing game. And now in the run game, you look at Chris Carson's gone over 100 yards against them. Mostert in Week 7, 7 for 59. Aaron Jones last week, 12 for 86. So I think it's a great idea. I do think this game has some merit to going under, like you said, playing Mark Ingram and Traquan Smith. He's due for a peak game after that Redskins game. He's gone down a couple of games, but he does have that big playability. So I think it's a good idea. And I haven't wrote the daily plug yet for the main slate, but I have a feeling that we want to avoid this game more than the ownership suggests we should, and the total, just based on a couple of factors. Yeah,
and there's just so much talent, right? Like these teams aren't necessarily funneled to 1 or 2 guys. Even someone like Mike Thomas, who at the start of the season we thought this guy was going to catch 140 out of 150 targets. He hasn't gone over 100 yards since the Atlanta game 5 weeks ago, right? So, and his targets are down too since Mark Ingram came. It's what you talk about in the NHL daily play. For those of you who don't play hockey, a lot of times we want to stack these teams, especially in low risk contests where the scoring is concentrated. One line gets a majority of the scoring. We're thinking Colorado, Avalanche, if you're thinking along those lines. And these teams, literally anyone could score. No one's really that safe, right? I mean, because the ball is spread around so much. So I think the same concept applies here. Yeah, I couldn't agree more. So, but nonetheless, this is going to be a fun game. Any predictions? I think the Rams pull it out on the road. I'll say Rams win 27-24. Yeah, Oof, man, I don't have one. If you don't mind, I just want to kind of hedge and say I think these are my two favorite football teams to watch. Like the Chiefs, shout out to the Chiefs. I don't want to, I know they're entertaining as hell, but the Rams and the Saints this year, like they've just been a blast to watch. And this game, like this is the shit right here.
It is. It's hard not to be excited about what the Rams are doing on offense. And then your boy Drew Brees is up to third in MVP odds. So, and there was even a shout out on, was it their last game? I can't remember when it was. Yeah, it was the Sunday night game. A shout out to him never winning the MVP before.
There you go.
And I was like, oh, shit. Walid's got a
point. That's the narrative, right? And hey, a big kind of national spotlight game over the undefeated Rams.
Yeah.
That if they win this Sunday, best believe the odds of Drew Brees winning are going to skyrocket. He might be the leading candidate, especially if he puts together like a 3-touchdown game.
Now's the time. If you really are on board with this thought process that Saints are going to finish as the top 2 team in the NFC East, or say in the NFC, and that it is a narrative-based award, and Brees has never won it before, and he's getting closer to the end, it makes sense to buy it now before – we did figure it's a pick 'em against an undefeated team, so there's a pretty good chance they win this game. And Walid said if that happens, then his odds are going to go down. So I think now is the time before Sunday to buy Brees to win MVP.
I like it. So before we talk about the Packers and Pats and get our picks in, and just 2 quick games I wanted to run by in case you had some, and you'll cover all this in the daily plug, but the Lions and the Vikings, another one of these high leverage spots as far as, playoff seeding is concerned. Lions kind of let down last week at home against Seattle. Our guy, Kerryon Johnson, still as good as and he's dominating snaps, right? Like I think last week, LeGarrette Blount only played 7 snaps, but as far as that's concerned, could have been maybe game script usage. LeGarrette Blount's not going to be in a game if they're down 20. But what do you make of this game? Anything noteworthy as far as the usage of Kerryon Johnson and also just the backfields of both teams?
Yeah, the biggest thing I think is if Theo Riddick returns. He practiced in a limited fashion today on Thursday, I believe. That's honestly one of the biggest reasons why Kerryon's gotten so much work recently. Caught 6 passes last week. There were some rumblings that with Golden Tate traded off to Philadelphia, that Theo Riddick plays more slot and get both him and Kerryon on the field together. But also, I've read a couple articles that Brandon Powell, he was a team preseason type of guy. I mean, no one's going to have him this week in DFS, but if he does take over that slot role, especially if Theo Riddick is out, he's a 0.1% GPP high-risk play. And if you have a deeper season-long bench, PPR, look for Brandon Powell. They're going to run 3 receiver sets, almost not as likely as the Rams, but pretty likely. So look for Brandon Powell potentially. But honestly, this trade of Tate just really helps boost Marvin Jones and Kenny Golladay. And
Marvin Jones delivered big time. He should now hopefully see even more targets. It's probably going to be hard to trade for him now if someone held on to him all year. But what is your rest of the – I know you're a big Marvin Jones guy. You've been on record, not just this year, last year, the year before. What's kind of your where's your optimism rest of the season for him?
I honestly think Kenny Golladay outperforms him rest of the year. But I think Marvin Jones finishes – rest of the season for the next 8 weeks or so as a top 24, top 30 receiver, which is just fine if you're playing, especially non-PPR. But his volume has to go up with Tate out of the picture. They were force feeding him the ball. Yeah,
no, I think so, and his skill set, his big playability continues to go underrated, and he makes for a perfect high risk contest play. If you had him last week, you definitely were rewarded.
Yeah, seriously.
So yeah, Packers, Patriots. Who you got this game? Obviously, Pats are touchdown or 6-point favorites, but it's the Brady A-Raj Bowl. I need a pick from you.
Patriots blow them out.
Patriots blow them out. Sheesh.
I do. I think what it is a touchdown favorite or 6 points. What is the spread? I think it's 6 or 7, whatever it is. Yeah, I think Patriots bounce back here. tough spot for the Packers on the road to LA. Now they're going on the road to New England, across the country. Pats, I know it's a short week, but they did play Buffalo. Not really that tough of a game.
It's a bye week, maybe. No, it was a tough game.
Yeah. And then I don't know. Just Belichick is like 10 greater signs than McCarthy. So I actually think this is a blowout.
Same. I think so too. As much as I love A-Rod, man, this Green Bay situation with McCarthy it's getting ugly. It's getting ugly quick. And like, no kidding. I don't want to, this has nothing to do with A-Rod or Devontae. Like, you guys are all gravy, but the Packers might find themselves last in this division by the end of the season.
They could. Yeah, no, seriously could. I mean, they're definitely not finishing above the Bears. I know that. So is Mike McCarthy the next Browns coach?
Looks like a good fit, huh? And you know what? Yeah, it sounds exactly like the type of guy the Browns would hire. And oh boy, I guess an improvement from Hugh Jackson.
Yeah, it can't be much worse. I mean, there's like zero chance, right, that John Dorsey hires Baker's college coach, Lincoln Riley, right? There's like no chance that Dorsey makes that leap. I just don't see how a football guy like John Dorsey with the connections around the league makes that kind of hiring.
Yeah, I think Greg Williams is going to be their coach end of the season and starting next season. Unless he takes one of his 7 offers he has on the table.
That was, oh my God, the funniest thing of all time. Did you see the running back coach, what he said today? The new running back coach?
I didn't.
Yeah, well, they were asking. I mean, this guy was like just waiting for his time to be interviewed. Kitchens, the new offensive coordinator, former running back coach. And they said, he's like, any more questions? And the media was like, no. He's like, actually, I know you guys are going to ask me this, but no, I did not get any head coaching offers today or this week. It's like real quick jab at
joke. That's hilarious. I like it. I love nothing more than clowning some of these rah guys. Like, it's like, come on, dude. Who can, like, first of all, do you think anyone in their right mind believes that? Greg Williams?
No. Who would believe that? No one.
And second of all, like, it's one of those things, like, if you got to tell me about it and you got to beat your chest about it, I'm going to bet that you're lying. Like,
right. Exactly. Yeah, there's a very easy comparison for this. We'll leave it out of the podcast.
Yeah, there you go. Well, hey, thank you guys for joining us. Good luck this week. A lot of content from NBA, NHL, NFL coming to you. If you have any questions at Occupy Fantasy, this is Lead. Any closing thoughts, Brian?
I don't think so. It's just going to be an exciting time down the line here as the NFL season starts to wind down. Second half of the season picks up.
Get your tickets ready. Some end of the season tournaments.
Yep. I think the biggest takeaway is do what you can, because there are cheap enough satellites to try to get one or multiple entries into that FanDuel online championship, the WFFC, $250 ticket. Yeah. Legitimate chance to win $1 million.
Yeah, it's not the $9 million. Yeah, millionaire maker. Right. In all sports, man, we talk about it often in NHL. Right. There's always overlay. Like, no matter what, this $333 GPP, like, it doesn't get more than 130 out of 200 slots filled up. So, and then even the $5 satellites, right? At the end of the day, like, unless you're gonna enter 150 lineups and you're a shark that has the bankroll to, play the $1 million makers, that's not the way you're gonna get big bread. But if you score one of these tickets, the odds improve drastically. I mean, just last week there was an NHL tournament, 300 people in it. Top prize got $20K, second place got $12K. So, like, legitimate paydays, right? All you need is 1 or 2 tickets, and it's like almost winning a league, right? Instead of winning like one of these 5,000, 6,000 entry GPPs. Right.
It's not even close. Like, the odds of winning one of these higher dollar GPPs is so much easier than these massive field tournaments. So if you have the bankroll and you're not spending a huge portion of your allocation, try to aim higher for higher tickets. Yeah. Obviously, it depends on your bankroll. You can't always try to get $300 tickets, but certain spots you can.
And even, just pitching in, you don't have to have 4 or 5 entries. You can throw in 1, right, on a nightly basis. And if you minimum cash a $333 ticket, you're getting $600. So it's like, winning 6 leagues, 6 $5 leagues.
For most people, that's doubling their bankroll. So
yeah, easily. So, and at the end of the day, chances are, you're playing this to hopefully get that big payday. And you want to make sure you're doing things that maximize your input, or else, hey, you can be playing leagues all day. If you're not getting satellite tickets to the big prizes, chances are you're going to cave in and then start playing max entry GPPs where you'll get swallowed up.
You're going to see enough screenshots on Twitter that's going to eventually persuade you to start playing them. And you should know better, but it happens to the best of us.
Happens to the best of us. All righty, guys. We'll see you next week.
Take care, guys. Thanks for listening.